Anyway, so let's just tie up some loose ends here because a lot of things were brought up. So let's start off by saying eventually we're going to get to Reb Yaakov's approach to Eretz Yisrael vis-a-vis this whole idea of the famous weekend, right? That there's a weekend where you're supposed to be machazik the Jewish people. Sometimes this weekend is going to be longer than just 3 days, depending on how much chizik the Jewish people need. And Rabbi Yaakov already spoke about Eretz Yisrael, right? About the second Beis Hamikdash. We saw that he spoke about the months of the year. He spoke about the Malchus Beis David not being in the second Beis Hamikdash, and the Ramban, and how he learned that Dafka they wouldn't be in the second Beis Hamikdash because the Malchus Beis David, because it wasn't a Geula, right? It was just a long NCSY weekend. Okay, so we're going to talk more about that today. But I did want to I wanted you to look at page 3 from last week that I numbered page 3 because I wanted to show you Reb Yaakov's Ksav Yad, right, on this, to make it very clear that Reb Yaakov does argue in these two places on the Ramban. With regard to the months of the year, he says, the Ramban says that it's Seichel Geulas Bavel, and Reb Yaakov says, no, the months in Persian or Babylonian is Zeichel Golus, right? Is Zeichel Golus because we didn't really have a Geula, so that's why we kept the months that way. That's why we spoke Aramaic in the second Beis Hamikdash. That's why the Ksuva in the second Beis Hamikdash is in Aramaic and not in Hebrew, right? To just remind us we're still in the Galut, okay? And that's why Malchus Beis David, not like the Ramban. The Ramban says the Chashmonaim were punished because they didn't take someone from Malchus Beis David, because they were over on Tzava Shel Oto Zaken. Yaakov said Lo Yosur Shevet Me Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yaakov said to the contrary, the Chashmonaim were tzaddikim, and therefore you can't say they would put someone in instead of Malchus Beis David. If Malchus Beis David had to be there, of course, Yochanan Chashmonai and Yehuda Chashmonai, they would have all, and Jonas and Chashmonai and Shimon would have all agreed with the Chacham. The Chacham would have spoke out and said that you have to put a Malchus Beis David. They would, but nobody spoke out. Why not? Because the Chacham themselves didn't want Malchus Beis David because it wasn't the Geula. Malchus Beis David was shaykh to the Geula. Now we'll talk more about this today, but I just want you to see the Ksav Yad, since the author on Chumash sort of wanted to kvetch Reb Yaakov into the Ramban. And I told you specifically that Reb Yaakov clearly, I wouldn't say explicitly mamash, but almost explicitly told me basically that he's disagreeing with the Ramban. So just let's take a look. This is number 3 from last week, and you can't miss it because it's Reb Yaakov's Ksav Yad. And I put an asterisk where Rav Yaakov begins this. It's only 2 little paragraphs, okay? And everything you see besides in Chumash, besides these 2 paragraphs, are all things that he heard, the author on Chumash, Reb Daniel Nustat, heard from other people, heard on a cassette tape, heard, whatever. But the point is, in Nach, Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky doesn't put anything together without telling you exactly where he got it from. In Chumash, Reb Daniel doesn't think he has to do that. So you don't know what's the Ksav Yad and in many places, you don't know what is he adding. So here you'll see the Ksav Yad, which is very short, and you'll see how Reb Yaakov writes about the 2 Rambans. So he says like this, by the asterisk, Ramban, Beferish HaChumash, Shmos Yud Beis, Pasuk Beis. In the Ramban, he quotes the Ramban. Kvazkiru Rabosenu Ze Inyan, v'amru Shemos Hachadashim Olu Imanu Mibavel. The Chachamim in the Bali Talmud already mentioned that the Shemos of the months came up from Bavel. For who be Rosh Hashanah be Yerushalmi, and this is in Rosh Hashanah, right? Masechta Rosh Hashanah, that is Yerushalmi. The Ramban already quotes that. Ulachayra. Madua Ozvu Loshan HaTorah v'noktu Loshan pras. Reb Yaakov asks, why did they leave the Lashon Torah? And no, this is still, I think, the Ramban. 1 second. 1 second. No, this is Reb Yaakov. Madu azvu Lashon HaTorah v'noktu Lashon pras. V'gam motzinu shebebayis sheni hoisa safa mudaberes b'Yisrael Lashon Arami. V'rak divrei Torah kosvu b'Lashon HaKodesh. V'alo b'Mitzrayim hoyu mishabchim osam shelo shinu es lashonam. Right? In Mitzrayim, they were mishabech them that they didn't change their lashon. Right? Meaning, so why are we being, why are we making a memory of the Chadashim in Lashon in the language of Persian language, and why did we speak in the Bayit Sheni Lashon Arami, and only Divrei Torah, like writing the Mishnah, was Lashon HaKodesh, right? Because in fact, in Mitzrayim, they said they praised the people for not changing their language, their names, and so Vanira Shazel Akol Nasa Lochich Sheyedu She'ein Zu Geula Shlema Dakati Nimshcha Golas Bavel. In other words, this is Reb Yaakov, one line, right? Vanira, it seems, right, that this was all done, right, to prove that there was no Geula Shleim in the second base of Mikdash, that was still the Akati Nimshcha Golas Bavel. In other words, to the contrary, it was trying to tell you that was still in Golas Bavel. So we brought up the names from Bavel, even though we went back territory, we brought up the names from Bavel, right? Because we wanted to remember it was still in Bavel. And that's why we spoke Aramaic, to tell you, even though we're in Israel, we're in Bavel. Right? So when the Hasidim speak Yiddish in Eretz Yisrael, you say, "Why? Come on, we got the Hebrew language." No, we're still in Golas, so we're speaking in Yiddish, right? That's what they'll say to you, and Reb Yaakov wouldn't disagree with them. Okay, so that's what Reb Yaakov says. It's clear to me. He doesn't say I'm disagreeing with the Ramban, but it's clear to me that he's learning differently than the Ramban. The Ramban is saying Zeichel Gula, and he is saying that they're still in Golas Bavel, and then he adds. V'ulai, maybe, here Reb Yaakov says maybe, shemitam ze lo heiru chachmei Yisrael lebeis Chashmonai. That's why the Chachmei Yisrael, the Second Temple period, the Tkufas, like either Tkufas Anshe Knesset Agdola, but it's after Anshe Tkufas HaTanoim already, didn't meir. They didn't make a ha'ara, what ha'ara means, a critique, right? The base chashmonai, when they merited to overtake and be victorious over the Yevonim, sheyoshivu mi base malchus base David, the case Hamalucha. Why didn't the Chachamim say you should put for Malchei base David in the seat of the Melucha, right? There were plenty of Rabbanim then. Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi ben Yochanan, no, Yehoshua ben Yehuda ben Tabi. I don't remember. No, it's before that. It's Yossi ben Yoezer, Yossi ben Yochanan was at that time, and I think maybe a door after that was the Tkufas HaChashmonaim, but it's already the period basically after Anshe Knesset Agdola. The Zugos. That's the period that we're talking about over here. And it's clear that they lived in the time of the Chashmonaim. So why weren't they mayor, the Nasi and the Av Bezdin? Why weren't they mayor that they have to put a Malchus in base David, right? Sharei Kosovo Ramban Bereshis, right? Mem Tes Pasuk Yuch, and then Shumapnesha Overall Savos Azokin LaYosur Shevet Me Yehuda, right? That they got a punishment, the Chashmonaim, because they transgressed the tzava, means the will of the old man called Yaakov. In the first generation, when they were tzaddikim gemurim, madu shasku chachmei Yisrael. Why were the Chacham quiet about establishing a malchus based David? Shebavadei lo hayu malachim shelo kedin. Certainly, Yehuda and Shimon and Yochanan, they would not have made a kingship not shelo kedin. They were tzaddikim. Elevada shagam lamid lahem melech mizera melucha keneged ruach hamochom. But to put a melech base David from the zera melucha, meaning from base David, was keneged ruach hamochom, keneged the spirit of God. So that they shouldn't make a mistake that it's a Geula Shlema. In both cases, Reb Yaakov is saying that that's why the Chashmonaim did what they did, and that's why they left the months in Aramaic, in Babylonian, or in Persian, right? So he says clearly they should, in both cases, shelo yitu shehi Geula Shlema. And over there before he said, Nimshcha Golas Bavel. It's still Golas Bavel. Okay, it's even stronger, he says it there. That's what Rabbi Yaakov says. To me, this is quite clear. Even though Rabbi Yaakov doesn't say that he's arguing on the Ramban, it's very clear that he's arguing the Ramban. The Ramban says they got a punishment. And Rabbi Yaakov raises the question, which the Ramban doesn't. I remember the Rabbi Yaakov raised it very seriously. He says, what do you mean? The Ramban knew about Lo Yosef Shem Yehuda, and the Chachmei Talmud didn't know about it. They didn't raise it to the Chashmonaim. Only the Ramban raises it to the Chashmonaim. What did you do here? Right? If they were supposed to make a Malchus based of it, they would have. Right? Now, someone mentioned, the fact that according to Reb Yaakov, right, what's going on with the Rambam? Because the Rambam says in Hilchas Chanukah, "V'chazru Malchus liYisrael." I think he says Yotermi Matayim Shana, something like that. Malchus came back to Israel. Now the truth is that in Chumash and Parshas Vayechi, he has a paragraph on that, but it's not such a kasha on Reb Yaakov. It's a kasha more. It's a kasha on the. I know is how you fit the Ramban over here, because the Ramban says Chazar Malchus liYisrael. The Rambam says Chazar Malchus liYisrael. Well, I'll show you what he says here. Where is it? Bemidu Melech min HaKohen v'Chazar Malchus Yisrael Yosemim al Matayim Shana Ara Churban. Right. That's what in page Reish Pei Hey in the new Reb Yaakov al Torah, it's in the old one too, if I'm not mistaken, that he discusses this issue. How does Reb Yaakov deal with the Rambam? It says Chazar Malchus liYisrael, right? But in any event, you can't really have Malchus. We said this last week. Can't have Malchus without a Navi being Mamana you. All right, you need a Navi. The Rambam himself says it. So it's sort of a question on the Rambam. The Rambam says in Hilchas Malachim, you need a Navi to be Molech somebody, right? By the way, the Rambam says in Hilchas Malachim, it doesn't have to be Malchus based of it. You could, like you had Malchei Yisrael also. They were from Malchus based of it. They were from Ephraim, Menashe, whatever it is. The Rambam says if a Navi tells you you're going to be the Melech, you're going to be the Melech. A Navi in Beit Dina, right? So it's really more kasha on the Rambam from Hilchas Chanukah, Hilchas Malachim. Hilchas Malachim, he says you need a Navi. And Hilchas Chanukah, he says that v'chazar Malchus liYisrael, right? Ve'midu Melech min HaKohanim v'chazar Malchus liYisrael. So Rabbi Yaakov, in order to answer this, because Rabbi Yaakov says at most they could be used as shofet, like we learned Rabbi Yaakov's approach. Because if you don't have Mashiach and you don't have a Navi, you can't be a Melech, right? So the way Rabbi Yaakov learns it, he says v'chazar Malchus liYisrael, right? Rabbi Yaakov understood. I think it's a dochik. Rabbi Yaakov understood the Rambam as the concept of Malchus came back, meaning they had an independent state. That's the way he learns. Oh, if you look in Reish Pei Hey, that's the way he brings Rabbi Yaakov. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I saw this in the Ksav Yad. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it now. But I saw it in the Ksav Yad that's what Rabbi Yaakov, that's how Rabbi Yaakov understands the Rambam. Because the Rambam is difficult, Rambam on Rambam. I mean, Chazra, they made a melech. What do you mean they made a melech? You need a navi to make a melech, right? So al kochi, they made a shofet. So what does it mean Chazra malchus liYisrael? You have to say a certain independence that they had. Did the fellow have a din of a shofet? It could be that the person had a din of a shofet. That could be very well that he did of a shofet. It's not so clear that he should have, because again, din of a shofet also came when Kodesh Baruch Hu was b'manak shofet. The shoftim, Vayakom Hashem shoftim liYisrael. That's what it says in Sefer Shoftim. So it's not 100% clear that you could be a shofet without God's input over here. But whatever we're going to say, the way the Rambam is written, Chazar Malchus liYisrael, Reb Yaakov could get out of that by saying, well, not Malchus based David, right? It's not Malchus based David. They had a melucha. They made the Kohanim. And by the way, when the Rambam says Ve'emidu melech min kohanim, he doesn't criticize that. Emidu melech min kohanim. It sounds like from the Rambam, it's okay. It's okay to do. That's not like the Ramban. Okay, that's already not like the Ramban. But in any event, I would like to, when I talk about Reb Yaakov's Shita in Eretz Yisrael, which I think someone pointed, maybe it was Wayne pointed out in the Ha'oris in Vayechi, right? And one of those Ha'oris is a Ksav Yad. Okay, I'm going to get back to that when we learn the third place that Reb Yaakov talks about this NCSY weekend. There's three places. Shmos, where we had. Now we're going to have this week Sefer Chagai, and then we're going to have in Sefer Shmuel. And in the third place, I'll already talk more about Reb Yaakov and his approach to Medinas Yisrael of today. Is it like an NCSY weekend, or is it not like an NCSY weekend? Right? I just mentioned to you when someone brought it up in the white shul, right? Someone came over to Reb Yaakov, and I was there. So I heard him say to Reb Yaakov, so does this apply to Medinas Yisrael? When Reb Yaakov had spoken about that this is like, really it was just L'chazek Yisrael for the longer Galut. Is this also? Okay, so Reb Yaakov said to him, you said it, I didn't. Right? Well, he didn't explain what that meant. So we're going to talk about that. Because, I have different things I heard from Reb Yaakov about Medinas Yisrael. One thing I can tell you, he was not a Zionist. Okay? And when we talk about this, I'll tell you some very interesting stories with my mother, who was a Zionist. In other words, my mother was a renegade in the family. She became a Zionist. Okay? She heard Zev Jabotinsky in Kovna, and she was sold. Right? So we'll talk about that. Mitzvah Shem, I'm not going to have two classes next week and the week after. I'm in the States, but after that, when I get back, we'll talk about that whole issue. But today, I'd like to talk about more the second base of Migdash, because that's what Rabbi Yaakov said was really preparing us for the longer Galut. That's why it wasn't like in Mitzrayim just 3 days, but it was a 420 years to prepare us for the longer Galut. Rabbi Yaakov's going to have a whole discussion on this. But I want to first introduce you to something that Reb Yaakov I don't think knew about. Okay, Reb Yaakov only had the Abarbanel on Yoshua Shoftim Shmuel Malachim, the first volume. That's all he had. Very old edition, right? And I don't know if Reb Yaakov saw the end of Sefer Malachim. Then the Sefer Malachim is extremely important. The Abarbanel there. Okay, so
this is from what was sent today.
No, I don't know if I sent it again today, but it's from last week, number 4.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So look at last week, number 4. Does everybody see the Abarbanel there?
Yes.
In Melachim Beis, right? So I underlined the last, all the way to the left, but I'd like to give you a little bit of a taste. This Abarbanel starts discussing how long the Jews are in Sfarad, in Spain. Okay. And I think I mentioned it. It is Pelagic, okay? It is just, if it's true what the Abarbanel is writing, and it sounds true, he's got facts on the ground, right? It's simply unbelievable, okay? The Jews, according to the Abarbanel, had been in Spain since the first destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, okay? Way, way, way before King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. They were the greenhorns. Okay, the Jews are in there after the first Beis Hamikdash. So take a look at the Abarbanel towards the bottom. Okay, towards the bottom of the right hand column that starts V'rosh Teda. It begins right all the way on top. Rosh Teda at the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines from the bottom. We have the 2 dots. V'yashvu Yehudim b'malchus Svard misham varata, and the Jews dwelt in Malchus Svard from then until now. V'nispashtu b'chol harim elu mipo ve'elu mipo, and they spread in all the cities, right? Some here, some there. Lo shavu el Yerushalayim b'zman bayisheni. They didn't return to Yerushalayim at the Second Temple period. Could you imagine? Everybody's going back to Israel. They're building a Beis Hamikdash, okay? And they're sitting in Borough Park, okay? I mean, think about it. If we would start building a Beis Hamikdash, okay? We knocked the Arabs off the Temple Mount. We built the third Beis Hamikdash according to and this guy's still sitting in Borough Park. Could you imagine that? I mean, maybe you can imagine it, but it would be really a tough thing, to explain, okay? You can explain it when there's no Beis Hamikdash, there's not exactly a full Geula yet. But once you have Beis Hamikdash, here they built the Beis Hamikdash, and these guys are sitting in Sfarad, okay? Ki amru shelo heiso tap ki da Geula shleima. Look at those words. They said that remembering that God remembered us is not a Geula shleima. V'lo nimtza shama aron bris Hashem. V'lo chala nevuah beineim. V'shara dvar makedoshim lo hayu b'kerev Yisrael. V'lechein lo yashuvu. In other words, the bottom line is, they said, this is not a real Geula because you don't have an Aron, you don't have nevuah, you don't have the Shechina and the Beis Hamikdash, right? It's not a Geula. They didn't come back. Now take a look at the next page where I underlined it. Aval inyim bayisheni, all the way to the left, the last column. Aval inyim bayisheni, lo haisa Geula shleima. Now look what he calls it. It wasn't kiim pkida chalusha, a weak remembrance. It's not enough. He says it's not a Geula shleima. It's a weak remembrance of God. Okay. Lefisha tamet kol hayom b'nei Yehuda b'zman bayisheni mishubadim rishona l'malchei pras. V'achareichei l'malchi avad, v'achareichei l'romaim. V'lo hayu b'hem melech mi beis David. Take a look at our Barbanel. They didn't have a melech mi beis David. So first of all, according to the Rambam, the Barbanel is wrong. What do you mean? They were mishubadim for 200 years. But he says they were mishubadim because his agenda is to say the Jews were this wasn't a real Geula. So they didn't have a malchus beis David, exactly what Reb Yaakov said. And the 10 tribes, did they return? No. Listen to this. We are today, the Bible are writing in 1400s. Right? We are today, Begolas Harishon Ogdim. We're still standing in the first Golas. Right? That's what Reb Yaakov basically wrote. That Golas is Nimshach. Okay? So that is the Abarbanel. Now, Reb Yaakov never saw the Abarbanel, and when I told over Reb Yaakov Shita to Reb Shlomo Fisher, okay, Reb Shlomo Fisher was a Goin Shebegonim, right? He was the biggest of the Fishers, right? He was the Av Bezdin with Zalman Nechemia Goldberg in the Bezdin Agodli Yerushalayim, right? I don't know if any of you people ever spoke to him, but if you didn't, you missed a great thing, okay? The man knew Kol HaTorah Kula with the Lashon. He quoted anything you wanted with the Lashon, okay? And he didn't care if he disagreed me even on Rishonim, okay? He looked like Yerushalmi, completely with the Streivel and everything, and he loved Merkaz Rav Kook. He used to go to Meretz Kol and Maseret.
No, I spent a Shabbos. Michael Citron was at Meretz.
Yeah.
And I went there for Shabbos because Rav twice.
Right. He used to come all the time. Okay. This was a man, just to tell you a little bit about him, right? He only came home once a week. He used to come home for Shabbos. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in Itri. The whole week he slept in the yeshiva. He learned day and night. He used to come home once a week his whole life. Came home once a week. Okay? And the man knew everything. So I went over to him and I told him over Reb Yaakov's Dvar Torah about, the NCSY weekend. I mean, I didn't use those words, but I told him over the Dvar. And he said, what are you talking about? The Kreskis already says it in the Or Hashem. There's a sefer of Kreskis called Or Hashem where he talks about, disagrees with the Rambam about 13 principles of faith. There's only 6, he says. And he writes a whole philosophy there. I never saw the sefer. I'm sure you could get it. I think someone in the university republished it also, like a scholarly edition, but I never saw it. But he said to me that it already says it there. And I think I saw one of the Oris, I don't know, Chumash or Joseph Kamenetsky brings it. Look in the Or Hashem. Okay, so other people say this, but one thing they don't say that I want to show you that I found. Okay, page 5. Okay, because the Abarbanel lived in the 1400s, right? And the Kreskis lived in the 1300s, okay? And I think I found somebody that lived in the 12th century that says it already, okay? Now,
Reb Shurin,
yeah.
Reb Shurin, why do you say that your grandfather didn't know the Abarbanel?
He definitely would have quoted him if he knew it. I wanted to tell it to him, but already I was in Eretz Yisrael, and he already, I think when I found the Abarbanel, he wasn't alive already. But if he knew he quotes the Abarbanel when he knows the Abarbanel, right? He didn't look straight through the Abarbanel. He liked the Abarbanel, but he didn't look straight through it. Every now and then he'd take a look when he wanted something. But the end of this Abarbanel is not part of the Navi. It's like he writes a piece of history at the end, It's not part of the Navi. So I don't think he ever saw this Abarbanel. I'm speculating because I think he would have quoted him. Reb Yaakov didn't know of anybody. He certainly didn't see the Or Hashem Kreskis, right? He didn't know of anybody who said this, because when I spoke to him about this, he always said it in his own name. He didn't say, all he said was Chazal already. You could see from Chazal, and I mentioned this, that they knew the second base of Migdash wasn't going to be forever. But nobody sort of explains whether it's a ghoul or not a ghoul. You could say there was a ghoul shlema, like the first base and then they went into Golas, right? But Reb Yaakov uses those chazals to prove, since they knew it wasn't going to be forever, that it was just a stopover, a 420-year stopover, and then back into the diaspora for the first Golas, meaning for Golas Bavel, right? We still didn't get kapara for Golas Bavel. That's the way Reb Yaakov understands it. So I just wanted to show you, I mentioned to you that the Rashi on Divrei Hayamim is not Rashi. Everybody agrees that. Why does everybody agree? I'm going to tell you something. You're going to laugh. Because this Rashi quotes Rashi. He says, Reb Shlomo ben Yitzchak Omar is quoting Sefer Malachim, Rashi and Sefer Malachim. That's pretty strange that Rashi is quoting Rashi. Right? And there's places where he quotes people who lived after Rashi. Okay? So who is this fellow? It's not 100% clear. But if you want to get a piece of knowledge about it, the end of Divrei Hayamim in Das Mikra, Reb Yehuda Kiel wrote a nispach, okay, where he talks 2 pages about who this person was. And he quotes a French Bible person, I don't know who he is, and he says it's Rabbi Yehuda Chassid's father. The famous Yehuda Chassid Sefer Chassidim, his father, which makes this into the 12th century. Okay? Now, where's the pasuk? I underlined the pasuk on the top right-hand column, pasuk Tet, right? Divrei Hayamim Beis, chapter Lamed Gimel, pasuk Vayeta Menashe et Yehuda v'Yoshvei Yerushalayim lasot ra min hagoyim asher Ishmir Hashem Pnei Bnei Yisrael. This is an unbelievable pasuk. And Menashe caused the Jewish people, Yehuda and the Yoshvei Yerushalayim, because there was no 10 Shvatim anymore. He was the Melech of Yehuda and Yerushalayim, right? Menashe caused, right, the people of Yehuda and Yerushalayim to go off the derech. Vayeta. Lasot ra min hagoyim, he do more evil in the goyim that God Hishmid. In other words, worse than the Canaanites, more than the Canaanites, right? The Shivas Umos, right? The Kanani, Achitim. He says he did worse than that. Okay, that means he was a pretty bad king. Okay, can't get worse than that. So comes Rashi, right, and says Vata Vayeta Menashe Nimtza Shal Yodo Nistalka Shechina. Through Menashe, the Shechina left the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know if you know, but it says he put a Avodah Zarah into the Beis Hamikdash. In the text, it says it, right? V'gam anu adayim begolas al yodo. And we today, in the 12th century, are still in Golas because of Menashe. What's going on here? We're not in Golas because of Menashe. We're in Golas because of Sinas Chinam. That's what you always thought. Right? He says we're in the same Golas, right? Rimtza, V'nimtza, right? Again, he says, V'gam onu adayim begolas al yodo. We're still in Golas because of Menashe. Whoa. Okay? Clearly saying what the Abarbanel says. In one line. We're still in that same Golas. What about the Beis Hamikdash? She doesn't discuss. What about the second Beis Hamikdash? She doesn't discuss that. The Abarbanel also doesn't discuss. I want to tell you what the Abarbanel is missing here. Okay? He says it was not a Gula Shlema, it was Pekida Chalusha. But there's an obvious question. So if you're so smart, Reb Yitzchak Abarbanel, so why did we go back to Eretz Yisrael? What was the Amshei Knesset Gdola thinking? If it's not a Gula, why did they build a Beis Hamikdash? He doesn't bother to answer that question. That's where Reb Yaakov comes in. Reb Yaakov bothers to answer that question. If it wasn't a Gula, so why'd you take us back? Right? Why did Jews come back? Why did you build a Beis Hamikdash? Okay? Let's go on to the new that I sent you today. I said it says February 16th, but it should be February 17th, right? The secretary wrote that. Page 1, Chagai. Do you see that? Chagai? Everybody see that on the screen? Okay. So let me just give you a very quick background. Chagai is only 2 chapters, so you can really give a background pretty quick, right? The first chapter of Chagai is basically telling the leaders and the Jewish people to build the second Beis Hamikdash. Okay? The Jews came back from the exile. They started building it. The background is they were stopped by the kingdoms like Parasu Modai, right? They were stopped. And 18 years later, he says, you can now build a Beis Hamikdash. Okay? That is the whole first chapter. Now, in the second chapter, right, they start building the Beis Hamikdash, and they build the Beis Hamikdash, the second Beis Hamikdash. It says like this. So chapter Bet, as you see in the inside column, chapter Bet, Bashvi be'esrim ve'echad lachodesh, in the 7th month, 21 days to the Chodesh, which is very interesting because that's Hoshana Rabbah. Doesn't bother to say it, but it's Hoshana Rabbah. Hayod devar Hashem biyad Chagai hanovi leimar. He got Nevuah on Yontif, on Chol Hamoed. I don't know if you can get it on Yontif, but he get on Chol Hamoed. He got on Chol Hamoed Nevuah. Emar Noel Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel Pachas Yehuda, vel Yoshua ben Yehod Tzadok HaKoyin HaGadol, vel Sheres Ha'am Leimar. Say to Zerubbabel ben Shaltiel Pachas Yehuda, vel Yoshua ben Yehod Tzadok HaKoyin HaGadol, and the rest of the Jewish people. Mi b'chem anishra shero et habayis hazeh b'chvodo harishon, uma atem ro'im oso ato, halo kamon ka'ayin beinechem. After they're looking at the Beis Hamikdash, and Chagai is saying, who remembers habayit hazeh b'chvodo harishon, this house in its original honor, meaning the house of Shlomo. Okay? Uma atem ro'im oto ato. And what are you seeing now? It's Nebi, right? The Beis Hamikdash is Nebi, right? That's what he's saying. So now he has to give the Jewish people chizuk to finish building it because it's pretty Nebi. The first Beis Hamikdash, they used the best wood in the Middle East. Where did Shlomo get the Melech Shlomo get the the wood. He got it from the cedars in Lebanon. They went down the river, right? They went down the sea to Israel, and he had non-Jewish builders, supplying the wood, right? The second Beis Hamikdash, if you look in chapter 1, you know what God says? Go up to the mountainous area, you'll find wood there. Well, there's not such bad trees there. There's okay trees, there's oak trees, right? But there's not cedars of Lebanon, okay? So people looking at this Beis Hamikdash saw like, a little Nebi shul, that's going to be the Beis Hamikdash. So he says, Vatoch chazak tzrubavel no Hashem chazak Yeshua, okay? And then he lets them know the truth. Now go to Pasuk Chet. It's underlined. Godel yiyek kfod habayis hazeh acharon min harishon. This Beis Hamikdash will have greater honor, right? This Beis Hamikdash will have greater honor than the first one. The Bayit hazeh ha'acharon, right? The last one will be greater than the first one in honor. It will have more honor. Okay, what does honor mean? Not clear. It's not clear what that means, because the first Beis Hamikdash had a ton of honor. Shlomo Melech invited the biggest kings from the whole Middle East. Okay, came to visit him. So what does this exactly mean? It's not so clear. Okay, the honor. People try to take guesses. Nobody does a great job. But it says over here something that's very problematic, and the Catholics took tremendous advantage of it. What does it say? Godel yeh kvod habayis hazeh acharon. The last Beis Hamikdash will be greater than the first one. Comes along the Catholics in the Middle Ages, say, guys, there's not going to be a third Beis Hamikdash. This is the acharon. Now it's time for you to convert to Christianity. We're going to have the Gula, not you. That's what happened. Okay? And Christians brought this up. I'm going to give you one example. Okay, I'm going to just give you one example. The Rashba. Okay, the Rashba wrote thousands of tshuvot. There isn't amongst the Rishonim, maybe the Ratvaz, but not amongst certainly the earlier Rishonim, anyone who wrote nearly as many tshuvot. There's like 7 volumes of responsa of the Rashba. And some of them are interesting because they're not always halacha l'maisa. Here the Rashba writes over a debate he had with a Catholic priest. Okay, now we're not going to go through the whole debate. I just want to go through a portion that's relevant for this pasuk. Okay, so I underlined it. That's page 2. Do you see page 2?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Chazaru bo alai. He came back to me mitzad acher. V'amar hinei katuv omer she'ein bayit acher bayit sheni. There's no other Beis Hamikdash. You have to buy a shisha. Kein kotsuv. Godel yekvod habayit hazeh acharon min harishon. You see that the priest knew the Tanach pretty good, right? Hinei shekol acharon v'im yesh acher la'acharov lo yikrez lezeh acharon. He wouldn't call this acharon. He would say hasheni, bayis hasheni, right? Like we know it as bayit sheni, right? So that's his question. Okay, watch the Rashba in action over here. And you have to remember one thing. The Rashba didn't have these questions beforehand. Today we say, give me the questions beforehand, and then we'll have a debate, right? I don't believe the Rashba had this. The Rashba is doing everything on the spot, just like the Ramban did, in his Vikuach, right, which we have, that Vikuach, and he won in Spain, the Rebbe of the Rashba. He also on the spot, okay? By the way, we know he won because it's written that he got a prize. It's in the history books of Spain, of medieval Spain, that he won. Amarti. Right, so what did I say? Lo karu acharon ela b'tzaref el harishon. It's only called acharon relative to the rishon. Ukamo, like, gives the example. Vayosam et hashvachos ves yaldehem rishona ves leah v'yeladim achronin. What did he do? Yaakov placed the shvachot, Bila, the Zilpa, and their children first. You remember in Parshas Vayishlach, he places them first to meet Esav. Vet Leah v'yeladim achronim, he places them last. Vet Rachel vet Yosef achronim. What the heck is that? How do you have achronim after achronim? So the Rashba says, well, you see in Chumash, it's written achronim, and they have achronim after achronim. So he says, right? El Shakar Achronim B'tzaref El Shvachos V'Yaldeim. They're called Achronim relative to the Shvachot, right? But you have Achronim, and then the last you have is Rachel, who's after Leah. Amar Zeh. So this guy said to me, this priest said to me, B'dibur b'nei Adam she'ena yodim v'lo b'yodim h'ichur av b'divrei hanavi she'yodei emes lo yavo. It could be when we talk about Yaakov placing it, he placed them last, and then he saw he has to place Rachel even after that. So maybe Yaakov first said, I'm placing Leah last, but then he saw I have to place Rachel even after that. But when God speaks, like by the Navi Yeshaya, by Navi Haggai, right? That's God speaking. God is telling Haggai to tell the Jewish people, Gadol yeh k'vod habayis hazachar min harishon. So God knows the end. Amarti, yavo afil b'meshe yomer l'navi mipi hagvura. It happens even where it's said to a Navi from God. How does the Rashba know? Sheken kosuv b'meshe omar hu yit'aleh l'Moshe. But God said to Moshe, V'haya im lo yaminu v'lo yishmu l'kol ha'ot harishon v'yaminu l'kol ha'ot ha'acharon. What does God say to Moshe? If they won't believe your first oath, your first sign, meaning your first, he makes with the snake, right? So then they'll believe the last one. V'hayam lo yaminu gam l'shnei otot ha'elu, right? V'lakachta gam mimei ha'yaor. What's going on here? God says if they won't believe the first one, right, to Moshe, right, they'll believe the last one. And then God says, wait a minute. That's the Acharon. It's not the Acharon. There's a third one. Should have said Hashemi. You see Acharon relative to the first one. You can have Acharon. That's the Rashba's answer. Okay? Acharon doesn't have to mean last. It can be, right? It can mean latter. The latter one. Not the last one, the latter one. And if they don't believe the latter one, they'll believe the next one. Okay? That's the way the Rashba understands this. Okay? Now, by the way, the Abarbanel, right, can't learn Gadol yeh k'vod habayis hazachar min harishon. The Abarbanel's in real trouble sitting in Spain. Why? Wait a minute. You mean God says there's a bigger covenant in the second base of English than the first, and you didn't come back? Your family didn't come back? The people in Sfar didn't come back? What? They didn't know the pasuk in Tanach? Right? They didn't know what the Haggai was telling them? They wrote over. They didn't see that? Right? So you know what he learns? The third base of Mikdash. And now he has to kvetch in. What does it mean? Gadol yeh k'vod habayis hazeh ha'acharon, bayis hazeh ha'acharon. But he kvetches it in. If you look at the Mitzudot David here, he doesn't by name, but he quotes the Abarbanel. Okay? He learns it on the third base of Mikdash. Acharon means the last base of Mikdash. Why isn't he discussing the second one? Good question. The Abarbanel has to kvetch and kvetch, but he needs it to be the third base of Mikdash because he didn't come back. Okay? Comes along Reb Yaakov and says that this base of Mikdash is the Acharon. Remember when I told you Moshe didn't lie? No, it says here Acharon. It's the Acharon. How do you do that, Reb Yaakov? How do you make it Acharon? So take a look at a piece of Parshanut here. Okay, I'm assuming you're gonna have a lot of questions about it, but take a look at a piece of Parshanut. This is, I don't remember what page it is. I don't have a page number over here, but it should be Haggai, page Shin Mem Vav. Okay, do you see that? It's Haggai,
Mark
Page 3.
Page 3. Okay. So what does it say here? Gadol yeh k'vod habayis hazachar min harishon. Hinei hamafarshim chatru limtzo pitronim al kinui habayis hasheni b'shem acharon. Mefarshim really talk about it. The Abarbanel, I think the Malbim talks about it. Sharei be'ezrat Hashem Yisborach nikavel is liskot b'habayit hashlishi b'meira v'yameinu. Right? Why is it called Achron? We're hoping to get the third Beis Hamikdash. Vanira. The be'emes kvar haya b'yodem mekubal Beis Hamikdash kodem nevuas Chagai. Wait a minute. They had a Beis Hamikdash before nevuas Chagai. How do you know? When did Chagai give this? He gave this nevuah at least 70 years after the Jews were in exile. Okay, it took 70 years. That's what Yirmiyahu said. Daniel said 70 years. Okay, so they were in diaspora for at least 70 years. He gets this nevuah after 70 years of exile. Ki hoite nevuas Yecheskel, he quotes the nevuah of Yecheskel, Besrim v'chamesh shana l'gulasenu. Right, 25th year. So this nevuah of Yecheskel is in the 25th year, and Chagai is in the 7th after the 70th year. Okay, in Perik Mem. Okay, v'achar kach, right, b'Mem Gimel Yud. I don't think Reb Yaakov wrote the Perik Mem. I can't believe he wrote the word Perik. It would be hard to believe. Reb Yaakov didn't use that word ever. He used the word kapitel. Never used the word Perik. I'll check the Ksav, but I don't think he used that. And by the way, Rabbi Yosef is usually sensitive to it. I don't know why he wasn't over here. V'achar kach b'Mem Gimel Yud haged et Beis Yisrael et Habayis. V'hainu Habayis Hashlishi. Everybody knows. Chazal say it. Everybody knows that the Beis Hamikdash that Yecheskel's talking about is the Bayit Shlishi. Now, when did he say that Bayit Shlishi? When did he describe it? In the 25th year. Okay? Isn't that a little bit strange? Rabbi Yaakov said, "Lefikach shapa kino et habayis hashem b'shem acharon." Therefore, right, it's very good that Chagai is saying this bayit ha'acharon. It is the acharon, because Yecheskel's was the bayit sheni. Okay, he. Why is Yecheskel not talking about the bayit, the real bayit sheni? Why is he talking about the bayit shlishi? What happened to the bayit sheni? Because that was supposed to be the bayit sheni. There's supposed to be two Batei Migdash, the one of Shlomo and the one of Yecheskel. What about Chagai's bayit? The afterthought, the NCSY weekend, right? So that's what Reb Yaakov says. It is the Acharon b'Nevuah. It's the last Beis Hamikdash b'Nevuah, right? That's the bayit Acharon, literally the bayit Acharon, and it's still the bayit Sheni. You don't have to come on to anything else. So that's right. Ulefikach shapa kidet habayis hashem b'shem acharon ukidei shalom nit'eh shekavanaso he al bayit shebiyecheskel and Yisrael. In order you shouldn't make that mistake, Hosif habayit hazeh acharon, right? Habayit hazeh doesn't say bayit acharon. Habayit hazeh, this one that we're building right now, ha'acharon. Klomer habayit shlfanenu shua acharon b'tzivui. It is the last one of being commanded. And that's what Reb Yaakov said. This Beis Hamikdash was an afterthought. Yecheskel was really supposed to. He was prophesizing about the second Beis Hamikdash. What's the base? That's the Beis Hamikdash we're waiting for. This Bayit Acharon was an afterthought. That's why it's called the Bayit Acharon, because it was the last one. The Anshe Knesset Gdola thought of it. That's what they have to do. Okay. Umash Tziva Yecheskel. Al Bayit Hashlishi Kodem L'Tzivei Bayit Hasheni Biarti B'Makam Acher Sheba Yecheskel Odian Sheshivas Tzion B'Mei Zerubbabel Ein Geula She'odotah Nibu HaNeviim Rishon. It is not the Geula HaGeula that concerning it the Neviim Rishon spoke about. V'arachti B'Inyan Zeh B'Makam Acher, and I spoke about this in another place already, which we saw some of those places. So what does he say? It was not the Geula that Zerubbabel made Zerubbabel. And I mentioned to you, Reb Yaakov doesn't say this, but I mentioned to you, Zerubbabel disappears after the Beis Hamikdash is built. He's there the whole time, disappears. He's Malchus based of it. He disappears. Probably the Anshe Knesset, according to Reb Yaakov, you have to say Anshe Knesset told him, you're not going to be a melech here. There's going to be a Kohen Gadol, but not going to be a Malchus based of it. It's not a Geula. And therefore, he mamish disappears. Nobody knows what happened to him. Look at the commentaries on Chagai Schar Malachi. They're all raising the question: what the heck happened to Zerubbabel Pachat Yehuda? They don't know. So some people say he went back to Galut. What? Malchus Beis David went back to Galut? You built the base on Mikdash? The answer is yeah. They probably told him, this is not going to be the Geula. Okay, that's what Reb Yaakov says over here, and that's the way he learns up the text. And again, what does Reb Yaakov use over here? He uses basically his idea, right, that this wasn't a real Geula. It was we'll call it a base of English midrabanan, so to speak. And Reb Yaakov is going to actually talk about this. Part of this that Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky quotes here, I gave you not only page 3, I gave you page 4, right? Shin Mem Zayin, right? Did I give you that? Page Shin Mem Zayin?
Yes.
Right.
All the way to 5. You gave 5 pages.
Now this part of Reb Yaakov is not written. Reb Yaakov Kamenetsky heard it on a cassette tape. Okay, and he writes that. He writes in the page before, on number 90, Mikan hutak mitoch haklata shel Shul Rabbeinu al Malachim. Right? He makes you know exactly. He heard it from Reb Yaakov's mouth. It's from Reb Yaakov's mouth, but he didn't hear from anybody else, Reb Yaakov's mouth, but he's writing it over. Okay? I'll just read you one piece over here. The new paragraph in Shin Mem Zayin. Okay, you see the new paragraph in Shin Mem Zayin? Kach bebavel. Hayta sakana sheyelchu v'yitmu ben hagoyim al yidei nesuei ta'arovis bizbolelus. Also in Bavel, there was a sakana that the Jewish people are going to assimilate amongst the nations through marrying out. Right? Ta'aruvas v'bolelut. Nita'er ketzad haya nira Yehudi bisman golas Bavel. And now Reb Yaakov decides to explain what a Jew looked like in the time of Bavel. When you see these little kid storybooks, Rabbi Akiva looks like a Chassidish Yid, right? And, they always look like as if they lived in Williamsburg in the 20th century, right? And we all laugh about it, right? And in the Dati Lumi books, he looks a little less from, he looks like, a little bit, that he looks a little more Dati Lumi. I don't say as an Nidhi Kippah, but he looks Dati Lumi a little bit more, right? But Reb Yaakov begins to describe, okay, you know what? We'll leave it for now. Reb Yaakov is going to describe what a Jew looked like in First Temple period, and this is a very big chiddush. It's not a chiddush. It's true, but no one wants to talk about it because we want them to look exactly like we look. And Reb Yaakov says, I'm really sorry to tell you they didn't. They looked like Jews without most of the Rabbanans that we have. And that was the problem. Okay? They needed those Rabbanans, which they got in the second base Midrash, and that's what the second base Midrash was for, he says, right? It was to keep them there 420 years, create all the Rabbanans, right? Including Pasakum, Bishalakum, Yayinakum, all things to make sure that we would last for 2,000 years, right? That was that weekend. That's what we did on the weekend. On the weekend by Moshe Rabbeinu, maybe he'd have given them some mitzvahs. On this weekend, he gave more to the Rabbanans. Okay? But Rabbi Yaakov will explain it next time. So in 2 weeks from now, we'll continue on page Shin Mem Zayin, and then we'll go on to the last place, which to me is the biggest chiddush of Rabbi Yaakov, where he talks about the NCSY weekend in Sefer Shmuel. Okay?
Have a
Question.
That'll be 3 weeks from now.
Right. Not next Monday and not the Monday after that, the Monday after that. I'm coming home actually on a Tuesday, so I'll miss the Monday.
Why can't we say that this is that the Tanaim or Zugim, whatever, understood this to be like thought this might be a process, like we're starting off without Malchus Beis David, but eventually we're going to get there. We're starting out without Nevuah, but eventually we'll get there.
Okay, so I want to tell you something. I never heard that from Reb Yaakov, but that's the Malbim. The Malbim, take a look at your Malbim in Chagai. There's other places too where he says it, but take a look in Chagai at the Malbim. He says exactly what you're saying. Okay? That's the Malbim's approach. it could have been the final Beis Hamikdash, right? So Bias Hazeh Achron, the way Jonathan is saying it, right? Bias Hazeh Achron is it could have been the Achron. That's the way the Malbim learns it. I'm pretty sure. Reb Yaakov clearly says that there is one place that Reb Yaakov says it orally, a shtickle like the Malbim. I never heard it from Reb Yaakov like that. I heard it's just a stopover, a station, a stopover. But if you look at I skipped it here, but on Shim Mem Vav, where Reb Yosef Kamenetsky says in number 90, right there, orally, Reb Yaakov said if everyone would have come up to Eretz Yisrael, it could have been a Geula, but they didn't all come up. I never heard Reb Yaakov say that, but he claims that on one of the cassettes, Reb Yaakov mentioned that. Now, I have to tell you that I'm not sure Reb Yaakov, Reb Yaakov everything was progress with Reb Yaakov. I told you, what we see here, Reb Yaakov wrote over 20 years, like 10 different pieces over 20 years. So it could have been thinking at a certain point, had the Jews all come up to Eretz Yisrael, it would have been a Geula. By the way, that sounds pretty Zionistic, that Reb Yaakov was saying. I skipped that part because it's the oral part, but check it out on number 90 on Shin Mem Vav. That's where Reb Yaakov, according to Reb Yosef Kamenetsky, which I believe him, on a cassette tape said, if the Jews had all come up, it could have been a Geula, right? But they didn't come. And one of the people who didn't come, of course, was the Abarbanel's family, the Jews of Spain. But there were plenty of Jews in Babylonia, right? Plenty of Jews in Babylonia that didn't come to Eretz Yisrael. Sometimes used to come for Pesach, like we do now. We come to visit, we stay in Wolfson Towers, right? But they didn't come during the year. They didn't come make Aliyah, right? That's already in the Gemara. I think it's from Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach already has tainas on the Jews in Bavel. Why are you not coming back there to Israel? Right? So Reb Yaakov does mention that, right? But the thing that it could have been, the way Jonathan is saying it, even if they didn't all come, if the Jews did the right thing, it could have been a Geula. I'm pretty sure the Malbim says that. Check it out. Okay, we'll stop here, guys. We'll take it up in 2 weeks.
Reb Shurin, can I ask a question?
No, go ahead.
I just want to make sure I understood Rav Yaakov's explanation thoroughly. So I'm just going to try and summarize and see if I understand correctly.
Good, great.
He's saying that when Chagai said, "Gadol yekvod habayis
Hazeh ha'achron,"
Chagai was saying that in the 70th year, and the Achron is in the sense of the last Nevuah, not the sorter of the Batim.
Correct.
And he was referring to what we call Bayit Sheni?
No, he was referring to the Bayit Sheni.
Right? Whereas Yechezkel, who was Misnabe, how was it,
25 years.
45 years before then, the 25th year, he was telling us what we call is the Bayit Shlishi is going to look like.
Correct. And that's true. No one disagrees that Yechezkel is describing a Bayit that we didn't have yet. So Reb Yaakov says, yes, he's describing what probably should have been the second Beis Hamikdash, the final one. But in between, in the 70s, they decided on a new Beis Hamikdash. So that was the Achron.
And that's because sometime between the 25th year and the 70th year, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that there was a need to make something interim.
Correct.
And that's where the idea of the Bayit Sheni was born.
Right, exactly. And that's where Rabbi Yaakov says we got to get the Jews back to Israel, or there's not going to be any Jews to redeem.
Okay.
But again, it's like a parshanut on the text. I never saw anyone say this, that Acharon means the second Beis Hamikdash, and it's Acharon b'nevuah. I never saw anybody say it, but it's an interesting approach.
Well, you can also invoke the same thing that the Rashba said, that Achron doesn't necessarily mean last.
Correct.
Chronologically, it means the next one in order. Correct.
I like the Rashba very much. He did a good job with that priest. I'm just letting you know that Rabbi Yaakov literally learned that this is the last Beis Hamikdash. He didn't take it out of Pshuto. He said this is the last one, not the latter one or the next one, the last one.
But if that's the last one, then which one is Yechezkel's?
So this is the last one b'nevuah, not in historically, but the last one b'nevuah.
Uh-huh. But it will happen before the one of Yechezkel.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, we'll stop here, guys. We'll take it up in 3 weeks.
Have a good trip.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Good.